Hi, I am Mike Sheila. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development with Advantage Industries. And Russell and I look forward to this part of the month every month because we truly value our relationship with the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce. Proud to be a silver partner and really working to bring something educational and something helpful to our fellow chamber members every month. And this one, I put Russell to the test on this one. I really did. Courtney and I were brainstorming ideas, and I said, Russell, we're going to talk about Excel. And he took a deep breath and he said, okay, we're gonna do this. Now, full disclosure, I actually took a day-long Excel training about 5 years ago in a previous life. And I guarantee you Russell's going to teach me stuff because I've probably forgotten 90% of the things I learned that day. And that's partly because Excel is such a dynamic and robust software platform. And you hear those words a lot, and they're almost cliches today. But Excel truly fits that bill. As a sales professional, I have limited engagement with Excel files, but I know many of you as business owners, as business leaders, as financial professionals, you are in Excel every day. And our hope is that with today's process, you're going to learn a couple of interesting tips to help making this a much more versatile product for you. But we're also going to put your mind at ease, and we're going to give you some great resources at the end so that you can really empower yourself as well as the rest of the people in your organization to use Excel and make it a tool for success for your organization. I will now introduce my engineer extraordinaire, my Director of Technical Account Management, Mr. Russell Smith. Russell, pleasure to see you again today.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Courtney and Allie, obviously, as well. So let me kind of start sharing here, go over a little bit what we're going to talk about today. So first off, this is not, if you are an accountant and you're living in Excel 8 hours a day, I don't think you're going to learn anything new here, probably. This is really designed to help folks that are intimidated by the product and its capabilities, and really wanting to start getting familiar with it, see how they can apply it in their job, how they can use it to make their job and their work more efficient. And so this is getting people rolling on that journey without being scared of the product is really what we're going to be focusing on today. That said, like Mike said, there is so much in there that even if you have been using it a long time, there may be some new things in here too. Just want to set some clear expectations. So, and that's why I like this metaphor of the iceberg. As we know that the part of most of the iceberg is below the water and you don't see it. And Excel's a lot like that. There is so much in there, there's so much capability and power that most of us are only touching a small part of it. There's a whole lot under the hood that can be utilized and unlocked. So we're going to sort of touch some of those below the waterline things today. We're really going to be focusing on the getting started stuff up top. So what is Excel? It's really about, in any spreadsheet program, is really about making sense of large amounts of data. How do you process it? How do you filter it? How do you think about it and conceptualize it? And Excel is really about turning a massive information into something that is compartmentalized and small enough that you can wrap your head around and actually think about it and use it to solve problems. That's really what it's focused on. So to sort of get our start today, we're going to be, covering some very basic stuff in a lot of the ways that we're first asked to interact with Excel, or maybe we're not interacting with Excel yet, but it could help us with some of these tasks. So we're going to be talking about creating and importing spreadsheets today. We're going to be talking about this very important conceptual exercise, especially when you're importing data, cleaning up those spreadsheets so you can actually use them and you're not overwhelmed by information. We're going to look at some cool functions in the data tab and some formulas that I find useful, as well as, like Mike said, very important further reading.
Now, Russell, one of the things that you and I discussed as you were preparing this is, as robust as Excel is, it does have limitations, and there does come a time where other solutions make a lot of sense. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there
Wonderful.
are times where you can outgrow Excel, as powerful it is, and that it is no longer supporting all your needs, or the program itself is being overloaded by the amount of data you're trying to run through it. So, but there are solutions and paths past that point. We'll get to those. Some key terms I want to throw out here, which we'll get into, which are rows, obviously, columns, and we'll see those in cells. That is the individual boxes of data where you're inputting things in Excel. Headers, we're going to see again these in a moment. That is, titling your columns. Tables, that is the information, the specific area of information you're looking at, and I'll show you that too. Functions. So these are built-in mathematical functions to Excel. So these, think about, like I said, I like to think about I'm going to date myself here, my old TI-82 graphing calculator from high school, which I still have, of course, being a good nerd. But all those functions, trigonometric functions, arithmetic functions, sum, product, division, all those things that are built into Excel, and they have a nice toolbar for those. Then there's formulas, and that is really, again, we're going to go back to high school and some of these algebra things. That's where you're really doing some mathematics formulas that are supported and utilize these basic functions to solve more complex challenges and problems. And I'll show you a few examples of those too today. So without further ado, I'm going to switch screens. Oops.
And Russell, while you're doing that, one of my favorite aspects of Excel is the fact that once you create a formula, you can implement it anywhere you want. So you can do that for a group of cells, you can do it for an entire row or an entire column. And as a sales professional, frankly, whether I'm submitting my PTO form or I'm submitting my commission report, those have come in quite handy for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good example. We do submit our commission reports with Excel. So yes, there's a good usage case. Actually, that's a good segue too, because one of the things that Mike talked about as we go into this, and I'm going to show an example here in a minute, is very often, we come to something like Excel, and like Mike's case, we're going to send you to an 8-hour class on it. And Mike, did they tell you how you would be using it before that class, or how it would be applicable in your job?
Nope. They just showed me a bunch of rules, regulations, formulas, drop downs. It was mind numbing.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't, and I've been through classes like this too, where if I don't know how I'm going to use it, if I don't know how I'm going to help me, it's a lot of information. It's a lot of information I don't need. And I'm not paying as close attention as I probably should be. So my first piece of advice when tackling Excel or any piece of software is to think about what you're doing. Think about the tasks, think about your job and how it could help you, and focus on those items first. So we're big fans at Advantage of you start small and you build out. Absolutely. As you improve your capability. So don't worry about learning Excel. Think about, hey, I have a very specific task. I'm going to figure that out first. Break it out into a small chunk and build out from there. Once you've mastered that task, then you're like, oh, wow, this was interesting. I wonder if I could use Excel to do this other task. You might be able to. Then you've got something else to learn. So I'm a big fan of that. Even on things like computers, I have a friend who's retired and was infamous when she worked at the National Geographic on being terrible at computers, and she never bothered to learn them. They were not her friend, and fought with them. How we got her to learn computers? She likes to travel around the world. So we're going to learn how to use a computer by visiting travel sites and booking air and hotel fares. So there was a reason for her to start using the computer and using an internet browser. And all of a sudden it was easy and it was fast. And now she's very accomplished at it. So you got to find the right carrot, I think, to motivate you in these things. And that's a very important component to
And your
learning.
staff. Well, if you want your staff to adopt,
Right.
help them identify the task and how it's going to benefit them.
Yeah, you want to make very clear to people, here's how it can help you, rather than just a general learn Excel or learn QuickBooks. Let's go down into some of these specifics. So the example I'm going to bring up and how I first started using Excel was I meet with clients very regularly, every quarter, to do a strategy meeting. And we do an IT planning and strategy meeting. We look at things coming up down the road for them, projects they may need to do. We also look at the state of their existing equipment. Excuse me. So we'll pull an asset list, an inventory of here are all the computers that you have. How old are they? Do any of them need upgrades in RAM or drive space? How long are we going to keep them? When do we phase them out? Is anything running an out-of-date operating system? So I had this problem that I needed to solve very specifically of I need a good way to show my clients. So here's our database tool here. And this is an Advantage subgroup with some testing machines that we use for various projects. And I said, well, I have this raw data. I need to turn this into something I can show a client in terms of, when is it time to replace these computers? How many should we replace? So a lot of programs, and I would challenge you, go to a CRM tool that you use, go to Salesforce, go to various other applications. A lot of them nowadays have an export function for this type of data, and our tool is no exception. And if you play around, you'll probably find it, or check the help documentation. And we have an export in all. And it's going to make me a nice little spreadsheet. Click on that here. It's going to open in Excel. And I'm left with, again, this big collection of data, which isn't very clear and it's hard to read. And I'm not getting a lot out of it. So first thing we want to do is, and this is one of these things, so if you notice on this window, this file type comes across as a CSV. That's a comma separated value. That's a universal spreadsheet format. It doesn't care whether you're using Google Docs, Excel. It doesn't care if you're using an ancient program like Lotus 123 for that matter. It is a universal format. So typically when you're exporting data, that's how it's going to come across. One of the first things you want to do is save it in an Excel format, because that gives you better tools and functionality. I can do a lot of things on a CSV file, but Excel will let me do things that aren't easily encodable in that format. So like if I want to make a row a particular color, for instance, I can save that in an Excel file. I cannot save that color in a CSV file.
I learned that one the hard way. I was downloading a CSV file and then opening it with Excel, and every time I tried to make a change, it wouldn't allow me.
So the first thing I'll do is go up here and go to Save As. And I'm just going to save this in the downloads for right now for our demonstration, but I will do and see right here, this is one of those gotchas. Save as type. It's always going to save in the same type it opens in. So it'll always start with CSV if you started with CSV. I'm just going to pick here Excel workbook, that first one on the list, and hit save. Now, if I do things like colors or formulas, some of the math I'm going to be showing you, that will all save correctly. If it was a CSV, I could do all that work and I would save it and I would lose it. So that's a very important, like Mike said, gotcha.
I learned that one the hard way too.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I like to do is I like to clean it up. There's a lot of information on this program, and there are a lot of things that I don't need if I'm just trying to determine what models of computers they have, for instance. So there's data I can clean up. There's sort of accounting and admin data that I don't need. I don't need to know what IP address they're coming in from. So one of the first things I like to do is make it easier for me to wrap my head around it. So I'll go through and start cleaning out columns of data that I don't need. And there are two ways to do that. So one is you can just click on the letter at the top of the column, and you can either hit the delete button on your keyboard or select delete. And that will permanently remove it from the spreadsheet. And that's fine. If I know I'm never going to need that, and in this case, I know I'm never going to need this field, so I'm just going to delete it. There's another way to simplify your view, and that is hiding a row or column. And so that's a usage case where I probably don't need the IP address the computer's calling in from, but what if the client asks me, oh, yeah, I don't know which computer that is. Is that the computer at the office or at their house? Oh, I might need that now. So in that case, I'm going to do a right click and a hide. And that removes it from my field of view. It's not distracting me anymore. But if I need to get it back, it's right up here. And I can unhide. Oops.
So Russell, I've
Unhide the
always
field.
found the difference between hiding and deleting very interesting. There's a very obvious one. Delete's permanent. Hide is temporary. Is there anything else that we might want to use as a judgment point between hiding and deleting files or columns or rows?
I don't know. I usually find, Mike, you may have some other thoughts. I usually find that it really helps me. Excel is a very visual. I'm a visual thinker. And so I think I'm going to have different perspectives than some other people for that reason. I'm definitely a graphical user interface guy. I may definitely click with the mouse rather than enter, programming commands. So for me, visually looking at it, I like being able to simplify my view, and that's my primary usage case.
So that would be hide more often than not.
Yeah, that would be hide more often than not, just to, again, help me wrap my head around it more easily. The other thing I like to do when setting up, so yeah, I'm going to hide this one. A couple other things I like to do to help me out. So one is very often it's a great idea. One of the things you want to do is you want to filter data. Filtering data is so valuable. So we have, like I said, this is our test machine group. We have an old Windows 7 that we occasionally need to run testing on. So let's say I wanted to just see, and I'm going to pretend I'm going to change one of these others to a Windows 7 machine. But let's say I just wanted to see the Windows 7 computers and nothing else. At the top here, we have a set of headers that were brought over, and you'll notice they match the headers here that came out of my program. They're not actual data. They're descriptors for the columns. So they're not counted in or I don't want them to count in any sort of analysis I'm doing. I want them to be separated as a header. So one of the things that I will do right there, actually, let me see if I can move this over, is I will go to this data field up top. Data fields are front, and there's some very cool things there, but this is like data 101. Click on that first line, click on filter, and I've done a magical thing now. You'll notice that here we have all these little pull down arrows that appear, and I can turn that on and off at any time I want. At this point, now I can click on this, and you'll notice it has select all 7 or 10. So it actually reads the fields that you have in that column, and I can say I only want to see my Windows 7 machines. I can uncheck the 10 box, and there I go. They're just my Windows 7 machines. Or I can do the opposite. I could say only show me the Windows 10. There they are. And the more fields you have, there may be quite a lot of these. So we have a lot of different models of computers here. But again, if I wanted to only see the precision T3600, I can uncheck select all. I can just tick that machine, or I can do 2 or 3 of them. And now I'm only seeing those computers in the field. Hugely valuable, use that all the time. And then just go back, just select all again and hit OK, and it'll re-add everything. The other thing you're probably noticing is that a lot of these lines are cut off. And all you need to do to see the full width of that line is to double click C near the letter. It's going to turn into one of these vertical lines with an arrow. Double click that, and it'll automatically fit the column width to the longest entry in that column. So the biggest thing here is probably these lines here on 36 and 37. It's going to make the whole column that width, so I can see everything without having to sort of scroll over or mouse over to see what's described there.
All right, Russell, I have to give you some serious kudos because Patricia Dubroff asked in the chat exactly how you do that. So I didn't even get to ask you the question,
Oh, darn.
and you answered it. So well done, sir.
Yeah. Now, the other thing you can do, Patricia, is you can actually select multiple columns at once. So I can, click on the first column. If I hold down the Shift button on my keyboard, I can then go to the last column. And if I do a double click now, it'll do it for all of them at one time. So I like that trick as well. So now I can see everything. Now, sometimes this is a little annoying. It does count the headings like, wow, I've only got 2 numbers or 1 number in this column, and it's this whole big width because it's saying operating system at the top. If I shorten that, let's say I just want to make that easier for myself, I'm just going to say OS, and then I double click again, and it's going to resize the column smaller. So that double click with that side to side arrow, that'll go up or down as is needed. Okay, so now we're looking better. And sometimes I'll even make it a little nicer. Maybe I'll make my headers underlined and bolded just to make it a little easier for myself. So I've cleaned out some data. I've deleted some columns, cleaned it up. Very cool. Now I'm going to hop over to another spreadsheet where I've done a little work on, but any questions about sort of preparing the environment? And like I said, just make it a little easier. If I don't need it, I'm going to hide it away. I'm going to delete it. Why complicate things? Want to make a simple life. And it also helps when you are presenting to a client. You want to share this spreadsheet with a colleague or client. Again, you want to make it a simple, easy to visually understand document.
Yeah, and this is probably a good time to point out, Russell, that there are some advanced techniques where you can put a grid box around an entire cell so that if you are presenting this as a document to someone, you can give some clean, because if you print this as it is right now, it'll basically print as a sheet of paper with everything lined up nicely, but there's no grids breaking it down. So you can take that step. And it's a fairly easy one to do in Excel if you're going to present if you're in person with someone and you're actually going to present the document, or if you're sending them a PDF as well, it'll give those nice grid lines and give some structure and clarity to the document.
And that's actually a really good point, Mike. So you have colors up here. They give you some preset ones that are sort of typical meetings. I use these a lot, so if I want to highlight something, if I want to just do a box, I can click on just a box, or I can do several at once and highlight with a color. And I can do that. If I want to do a whole line, I can click on the line, same thing, or I can click on a column, same thing as well. So, you can do all kinds of color coding there. Now, Mike also has something a little cooler. Oh, by the way, there's a shortcut to undo, which I'm using right now. This will work in Word. This will work in Excel. This will work in almost any program. Control Z, as in zebra on your keyboard, is an undo. So that way I don't need to go back and click on normal. I can just hit Control Z and it's undone.
You could also use the arrows at the top. The one that
Correct.
bends to the left is a
Undo,
good friend
delete,
of mine. I use
and
it
then
quite
it'll
a bit.
redo. So if I want to turn it back, oh, I didn't mean to delete it. I didn't mean to undo that. I can hit that up here. Nice one, Mike. Thank you.
Those are two of my favorites.
Yes. Now Mike's talking about something really cool too, where you can also, have Excel do some of the work for you in terms of the visual look. And so this is that Format as Table button up here. And click on that little arrow, and there are all kinds of templates for how to present the data visually. So I could pick one of these templates, and I'll just say, okay, I've already selected the area I want. Oops. Hang on, gotta remove my filters. Actually, what I'll do is I'll pop that over on the other sheet. This, format as table. Yeah, I gotta hop over to the other sheet. That's okay. So here's a sheet I prepared earlier a little bit, and I'm going to show some things. So let me show that same thing here.
Look at those sharp lines.
Look at those sharp lines, right? I'm going to take a piece of data here, zoom in a little bit. I'm going to go back to my home and format as a table and pick something I like. And there we go. Now I just chose a portion of it. That's a cool functionality. You can choose the whole thing and format as a table, or you can choose just a portion. Why would you want to choose a portion? Well, maybe you only want to visually highlight a portion of your data. So there are visual reasons to do this, right? And selectively print it. There are also functional reasons to do this. So we'll get into this a little bit more, but if I'm doing equations or functions or math based on this data, and I don't want it to use data down here, that's the reason to format it as a separate table. So I can, so there may be cases where I only want to do calculations in this part, not the rest. So I may break that out as a separate table. I'm just going to go ahead and undo that though. All right, so here's a sheet, and we've got some interesting functions here. Now I'm going to hide a few of these because we don't need them. Let's see, serial number, model number, I'll leave that. Now what I'm looking at in this case, let's pretend I wanted to go to this client and say, hey, we need to replace some computers. And again, this is a good example. This is our test group. So we got some old computers on here that we do testing with, as well as some new ones. So it's a nice representative sample. And I've got the age, I've got the purchase date, I've got warranty expiration, I've got make and model. So let's say, just very simply, let's go to a function. Let's say I wanted to find out what's the average age of my computers. Now, some of these computers, you'll notice they're virtual machines, and they don't count. So maybe I want to filter those out because it's not a physical box. So I'm going to go ahead and add my filter again. I'm going to go ahead and take out, oops, wrong one. I'm going to go ahead and take out these virtual computers. Voila. And then I'm going to go here and say, well, I just want an average age for my machines. There are these lovely formulas up here on that tab and a lot of normal math functions. How are you able to scroll without losing the header? That's a good question. I'll get to that in a second, Shalini. I love that question. That is up here, and is, oh, Mike, where is that again?
It's locking the header.
It is.
And I'm trying to remember where that is. Is it page layout? Page layout makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'll pull it up in a second. I'm sure it'll come to me in a second because obviously I did it earlier, so apologies there. I will come back to it in a second. That's a good question. So, oh man, it is one of these buttons. We'll come back to that in a second, Selene. David's helped me out. That is right. It is view. Thank you. I couldn't remember the tab. Let's see. And there we go. All right. freeze panes. And you can do multiple lines. So yeah, thank you, David, for hopping in there. I appreciate it. So there's a lot in Excel, as you can see. So I'll go back to my earlier one that I haven't modified yet. And here, if you see, if we scroll down, it disappears. Now, if I go to line 1, I go to view, I go to freeze panes, which I always lose right there. And I've got a couple options. So one is it recognizes the top rows are often headers. So in this case, I'm just going to say top row. I could freeze multiple lines if I wanted. I could freeze a column, for instance. So let's go ahead and do that. Here's the top
so
row.
like if you want to see whose name is associated with the computer, so you could scroll
Right,
across.
exactly. And I could go to freeze first column. So now when I scroll down, didn't work. There we go. Now when I scroll down, top line doesn't change. If I scroll side to side, now I want to freeze the column. So I'm going to go freeze first column. And now when I do that, I get that. So you can freeze either as needed. And we'll use this sometimes like spreadsheets where, for instance, you've got financial data for several months. Very often, you don't want to see 6 months, you don't want to have to scroll through 6 months of data. You do want, say, your properties or expenses listed here in the first column. But, I only really care, for instance, about column G over here. I don't need to see this other stuff. I want to be able to scroll over and look at column G and still know which properties I'm talking about. Good question. So here we go here. Now in this case, I'm going to go to formulas, and that Microsoft's trying to help you out. You'll see that again and again in Excel. So Excel gets easier to use every year, bizarrely enough, because they keep adding more tips and tools and more buttons to kind of make life easier. So I can go here. I'll usually pick a box, 1 or 2 below the field. I'm trying to get an average. And I can select average here. And you notice it puts this box around the numbers. It didn't go all the way up though. So it's only going to average right now lines 20 through 36. But I want it to average everything. So I can drag my box up, just mouse over it, go all the way to the top. And I just basically hit enter on my keyboard. That is the average age of my computers right now, 3. And
if you don't want all those decimal points, you can shorten it to 2 or 3 or 4.
Absolutely, yeah. You can at that point, you can shorten it down, you can edit it, you can modify it, whatever. There are functions in here, obviously, for some, addition. You've kind of got to go back and remember your high school math terms, so they will throw out things like product instead of multiplication, so all that. There are plenty of math functions in here, all kinds of fields. They do like to highlight recently used, but there are date and time, math and trigonometry. So there are things like cosine, not to give anybody scary flashbacks. But all those functions, like I said, that you would have on your graphing calculator are here in Excel. So it can be a very powerful math tool. I literally have clients there. They do, they don't use the calculator app on their computer. They have an Excel spreadsheet open that they're just constantly, putting figures in and out of all day. Kind of interesting. You'll also see that it will learn what you use most often. So I love the recently used. Those will be the things that I'm frequently using all the time. And it will learn with you as you use Excel. Financial, for those of you who are bookkeepers or accountants, there's going to be a lot of stuff here. I don't know what that is, but I think you will. They're logical functions. These are very interesting. So we're going to dive into a little bit of these logical functions too, and a little bit of this programming. Text. There are also things I like too. So let's say I wanted to talk about, well, how much are the computers going to be to replace? I wanted to add a new column. Adding a new column is a very helpful thing. I can right click on any column, go insert, and it's going to add a new column there. It'll always do it to the left of where you click. If I screw up, if it's, oops, it was to the right, don't worry about it. Just right click up here and hit delete again, and it's gone. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and insert one. I'm going to say cost, and I'm going to say $1,500 to replace this computer. I want this to be dollars, though, when I present to the client. So I can just go up here, and on the home page, there are percentages, there are dollars, so I can hit dollars. Everything I type in this field is now going to be expressed as dollars. So I can go down in here and type 325. It automatically gets converted to dollars. Percentages, again, you're going to have to go back a little bit to math class again. And so you're not going to type in 4. You're going to type in 0.04 to make 4%. It's out of 100. Let's see. Yeah, so like I said, data tab is very helpful. And the home screen is again very helpful, as well as a few other functions on view. So one of the interesting things with Excel is there's this basic math, like we just talked about, averaging, addition, subtraction, very helpful. But you can do much more elaborate math formulas, and people do. We're not going to get into a lot of these today because there's a huge number of them. It's basically infinite. If you can write it as a mathematical expression, you can do it in Excel. And they can be very long and complicated for that reason. And the cool part is, we have clients that are, typically financial people, and they may have very complicated formulas that are running on. Our president, Keith, is an accountant by trade, and he's been helping his daughter buy a house and looking at places. So he has a mortgage calculator spreadsheet that he learned how to build, God knows, 20 years ago. But he's got all the formulas in there, and you plug in the current interest rate and you plug in the amount of the mortgage, and it will lay out all the monthly payments for you and the payback cost and everything that happens for the next 30 years. And that's because he's using mathematical formulas to support his Excel spreadsheets. So let's take a look at just a couple of these to kind of give you a flavor of what I mean and some things I like to use. So one of them is an interesting one is, let's see. Okay. I like here, what if I wanted to make a spreadsheet and just have a column to say, should I replace the computer or not? So I'm going to add a new column here. I'm going to say replace. And feel free to use things like question marks in your headers. That's okay. And what I want to do, without me having to manually type in yes or no, I want the spreadsheet to tell me the computers I need to replace based on their age. And then I can filter it to show just those computers. So when I take it to the client, it's done the work for me. I have a filtered list, and I can just show it to them and say, here are the machines you need to replace. So one of these functions, and I like writing these out here to help myself. Like Mike said, once you learn to master a couple functions, you can keep reusing them. And that's a great thing to do.
Equal sum is my friend.
Equal sum. Yeah, there's a little bit of syntax that you'll see as common with all of them. So anytime you're doing a mathematic function or formula, you're going to put in an equals sign. And that lets Excel know that you're not typing in data, you're not typing in 5 years, but you're actually trying to do math. So I'll click on the box up here, and I'm going to type equals. And again, that immediately tells Excel, I'm going to type in some math. This is not data. And there are all kinds of things you could start typing. So some of this could be as simple as a sum. And if I start typing, Excel's trying to make my job easier. So it'll say, oh, you typed S? Well, you may be looking any of these. And just to show you how many there are, these are all the functions built in that just start with S. So this is one letter of the alphabet and all the built-in functions that Excel can do. So there's a lot of stuff here. But in this case, I'm actually going to do a if formula. And let me show you that. So, and I've already written it out here. So we had an average age. Okay. Take this and let's see, I wanted to do, so what I'm going to do here is equals if, and that's like for either or. That's like if, and just think about how you use if in general conversation. Again, they're trying to make it simple. So if model equals, or make equals del, manufacturer equals del, then something happens. Either we say it's true or we say yes. And so I could do something like that. So if, and then the other part is I put a parentheses. Parentheses tells it where on the spreadsheet I want to start looking. So if I type in that parentheses, and I'll zoom in a little more here for you. Oop. So you can see that better. So I'm going to type if, and parentheses. Now I can select an area of the spreadsheet that I want to reference. So I'm going to say if the manufacturer is Dell, so I'm going to say if D3 in this case, that's that cell. And then I'm going to say equals, let's see, manufacturer. I forgot to put a quote in at the start. So again, Excel will correct you if you're wrong. If manufacturer, and then I can say, in comma separate ideas, I could say true, false. And then another parenthesis will close the formula. And actually, I think I want to say here, instead of manufacturer Dell, there we go. So that fixed it. Okay. So basically, I did a very simple thing here to say if this field, if it's a Dell, say true over here. Now that could be, again, I probably don't need to do that in this case. It's more an example. The other cool part is, so once I've got my formula correct and it's doing what I want it to do, there's a little black box here at the corner of your formula field, and that you can use to extend the formula to other lines on the page. So rather than having to type that formula in each time or copy it and paste it in each box down here, I can just click on that little box and drag it down. And I can tell it's working because this machine is not a Dell and it says false. So that's a very basic example of a formula. May not be useful, but I've done a couple other interesting ones. So here's a good example of another one. And this can be useful in terms of managing customers or managing a database of entries. So here's a formula I set up, which will be, I want to be able to put in any name here, and that would be the computer name, right? And I want it to tell me what type of machine it is. Is it a workstation or a server? I want it to be able to tell me who made it. I want to be able to tell me the serial and model number. So there's a formula for that. And this could be, again, useful in some kind of administrative role or processing or just looking up, very easily for clients. Oh yeah, here's that model, here's everything. I don't need to look at this big spreadsheet. I can hand this off to somebody I work with and tell them, hey, all you need to do is type in the computer name and it'll solve it for you. So here my formula was VLOOKUP. That's just, again, another one of these function types built into Excel. And I put in my data set. And so the example would be, I'm going to type in a computer name. Oops. Just going to copy that. and pop it in here. And you'll notice that in that case, I type in the computer name. It is a workstation. It is a Dell. This is the serial number, and this is the model number. So you can get pretty fancy with these formulas. You can start doing things that are bordering on programming tasks. So this is functionality that would be, in a website or in a CRM. You can duplicate a lot of that functionality in an Excel spreadsheet. Now, have I used VLOOKUP before this week? No, I actually sat down and said, well, this is one of the things that I want to try to master today. And I was able to basically hop on a Microsoft tutorial, watch a 5-minute video, and I knew how to write this formula, which is a nice segue to where do you go next?
Yeah, I was going to say,
there's so
Russell,
much here, and it's very intimidating. And that got really fancy. It got really, I said, wow, that formula looks really difficult. And that was my point there, as I wanted to say, it looks difficult. It looks crazy. It was a 5 to 10 minute video for me to watch. But I knew what I wanted to do. I had a specific task, and then it's very easy to look it up.
Yeah, Russell, you and I were talking before the presentation today that my perspective is I like to Google things, and then I like to watch YouTube videos, and then I'll judge it for myself on a scale of 1 to 10. How difficult is this? And if I'm getting a 5 or less, well, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and try and dig in and figure it out.
Yep. So here's another formula I did. This was basically to say, I'm sorry, pasted in the wrong field.
And you've put together a really nice list of resources for us, right?
I have. We'll go to that here. Here's another little formula I made, which would look at, is the computer more than 4 years old? In that case, it would say replace. And if it was less, it would say good. And I can put any words in I want to, and it'll actually recalculate on the fly. So if instead of replace, I wanted to say Mike is cool, and I can reproduce that formula. And there we go. So instead of replace, it says Mike is cool. So again, this is very, functional. It's not as bad as it looks, and don't be intimidated by it. So to Mike's point, where do we go to get help? Present that again. Oops. Flip that around. All right. So, and we will have this sent to everybody. It's going to be posted. Here's some favorite resources I like. So one of them, Microsoft wants you to use Excel, right? They're a business. This is a core product of theirs. They'd rather have you using Excel than Google Docs. They want to help you as much as you can. And so they make a ton of really good resources available for free. There is a lovely page of just quick online videos, and these are not hugely complex. They're typically 1 to 2 minutes on a topic. And so you can see here, there's just an intro to Excel. There's a discussion on rows and columns. There's a discussion on cells and how to use them. Stuff we didn't get into today because there's so much under the hood. Let's say I want to make a pie chart with my data. Or let's say I want to show a bar graph showing the distribution of computers by age. Here's a tutorial on how to turn that data into a chart. There are formulas, pivot tables. Pivot tables are the bee's knees for anybody who's an Excel expert, and I'm not going to touch them today, other than they're very useful in accounting and managing large data sets. But let's say I want to start getting learning on pivot tables. Well, here's a 2-minute, 3-minute video that's going to give me the concept, what they are, how they work, how I might use them. Let's say I want to go deeper though, or let's say it's a more abstract and elaborate concept like pivot tables are than a 2-minute video. Microsoft actually has beautiful online training courses. and workbooks even. So you can actually take a class, there'll be lessons, there'll be videos, there'll be text, and then they will give you sample projects to work on. So there will be a workbook that you can download on, with some examples of pivot tables. There'll be instructions on how to make a project with pivot tables. So again, they really want to go out of their way to help you out. I know some people, you like having a reference book. I do too for certain things. So here are two good ones. These are both very well reviewed. They're covering the latest release version of Excel. There's going to be a new one later this year. You shouldn't let that hold you back from buying one of these books. The core functionality of Excel is basically the same every year. They're enhancing it, but you're not going to be missing a huge amount of information. So don't feel you need to wait for Office 2022 to come out or anything. And boy, Mike and I love YouTube and Google is always a great resource on these things, because one thing I like to tell people is I can guarantee you are not the first person in the world to want to know or to try to figure out what you're trying to do. I can guarantee you're not the first person in the world with the problem you're having. So, and there are a lot of nerds, there are a lot of educators that love posting solutions to these things. So again, if you're looking for something very specific, and it could be as simple as where's that button to lock the header? That's the kind of thing where I'm sitting, man, I can't remember it. What's going on? It's probably just as fast for me to Google it, and it'd be like, oh, it's in the View tab. Duh. There we go. Thank you, Google. And that was 30 seconds.
And Russell and I mentioned this right at the beginning that as powerful as Excel is, you can push it to its limitations and it'll start to fail you. It can reach the end of its own universe, as it were. And there's an evolution. Perhaps the most common one is a CRM. And you really do want to understand, well, what should I be building in an Excel spreadsheet? And what should I be building in my company's CRM? A fun fact, Advantage Industries built their own CRM from the ground up. It's called HITS. Russell and I use it every day. And CRMs can collect a lot of data and can be very functional. So when you're evaluating, well, where do I want to put this data? Think about how collaborative it has to be and how easy the access has to be. And then, what do you want the end result to be? Because if you're in the healthcare industry, you may be looking at an ERP. If you're in a sales industry, a CRM is going to be a good fit for you. You can try to do too much in Excel, as wonderful and as dynamic as the product is.
Yeah, if you're spending hours and hours a day in Excel and in the same spreadsheet, it's probably more efficient to think about what could be automated in that spreadsheet. What could be transformed with that. We also have clients where, thinking of one now, that they're a property management company. They have dozens of properties, all of them, and they have some very large accounting spreadsheets with a lot of data in there. And they're starting to crash. It's too many years, too many properties, too much data, and the spreadsheet's starting to become unstable. So they may be using it, all of a sudden crashes. Now, Office 365 saves your work as you go along, so it's not tragedy, but it's something you want to avoid. So Microsoft even has solutions to help move you along. So maybe that goes into something in Dynamics. Maybe that goes into something in SharePoint. Access is another Microsoft tool that's included in standard Microsoft licensing these days. And Access is a more powerful spreadsheet tool than Excel with more automation baked in and able to handle much larger data sets. So
Russell,
the one thing I wanted to add, Mike, is the other thing I like about Excel in terms of CRMs is that it is a way to test out concepts because it's faster to set up a spreadsheet than to program a new item in your CRM or to pay somebody to do that. So a lot of times we use Excel to test out a proof of concept. Is it useful for us to think about data this way? Is it useful for us to organize data this way? If we decide the answer is yes after a month or two, then we'll take the time to program it or look for that software product. But this is a nice low impact, not expensive, easy way to very quickly test out an idea without making a huge commitment. And it's a great tool for that too.
Well, Russell, once again, thank you for your excellent work today. For those of you in the audience, if this is a useful conversation for you, please let us know, because Russell and I we're the tip of the iceberg, to follow along with his metaphor, when it comes to helping our clients identify what software should they be using. And I don't mean this from a sales perspective. Yes, we want you all to become customers of ours. Of course we do. But if you have a technology question, Russell and I are happy to bring the resources to the table and help you get that sorted out. And if that means that you're buying a CRM that we didn't make, we're very happy to put you with the person that'll help you make that purchase. But if there's a technology question, we're available. And that's our hope, is that you'll feel like, hey, we can talk to Mike, we can talk to Russell, and they're not going to give us a sales pitch.
And like anything else, if you start small, it's not too big a task. So, you start small, build out as you learn, and then it's not scary.
So thank you, Russell. And always, thank you, Allie. Thank you, Courtney, so much for having us again this month. And we're already working on next month.
Can't wait. Thank you both so much. And we really appreciate all of you who tuned in today to the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce webinar series. Mike, Russell, awesome as usual. I learned so much. I use Excel every day, several times over. And one thing that I will probably call you guys on is I use multiple worksheets, and I've finally figured out a way to pull data from one worksheet that's way over here all the way into my main database. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that was one of those things we didn't get into, and that's favorite. But there are you can do multiple sheets in the same file and do some very powerful things there.
It's really cool. So it's wonderful. But thank you all. We look forward to next month. For all of you online, thank you for joining us again, and we will see you next month at the webinar series. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.